For the Amish, pork is one of the most valuable staples of the farm, and yet they manage to preserve it without relying on refrigerators, freezers, or modern cold storage. Instead, they turn to age-old methods of curing, smoking, and storing meat, techniques passed down through generations that keep pork safe and edible for months, even years. The process usually begins right after butchering in the late fall or early winter when outdoor temperatures are naturally cold. This timing is no accident. By slaughtering pigs when the air is frosty, the Amish take advantage of the natural environment to slow bacterial growth right from the start. The cooler season also means less risk of spoilage before preservation techniques are applied. One of the first steps is dry curing with salt. Salt is the foundation of traditional meat preservation, and Amish families use it generously. Cuts of pork, from hams to bacon slabs, are rubbed thoroughly with coarse salt, or packed into barrels layered with salt crystals. This process draws out moisture, the very element bacteria need to thrive. Sometimes brown sugar or spices are mixed with the salt, both for flavor and for additional preservative power. As the pork rests in its salty bed, it begins to change texture and flavor. Within a matter of days to weeks, depending on the cut and thickness, the meat becomes firm, dry, and far less hospitable to decay. This first curing stage ensures that pork can be kept for long stretches of time without refrigeration. For the Amish, this method isn't just about survival, it's about creating food that is deeply flavorful, ready to be enjoyed throughout the cold months, and able to feed large families without the constant expense of running freezers. How the Amish wet cure the pork in traditional way. After the initial dry curing with salt, many Amish families move on to the next stage, brining or wet curing. This method involves submerging cuts of pork in a heavily salted liquid solution, sometimes referred to as a pickle. The brine is made from water, salt, and often sugar or molasses with added spices like pepper, cloves, garlic, or mustard seed. Each family has its own traditional recipe, passed down through generations, that gives their pork a distinctive flavor. The meat is left to soak in large wooden barrels or stone crocks, sometimes for several weeks. During this period, the salt penetrates deep into the pork, preserving it from the inside out. Unlike dry curing, which draws moisture out of the meat, brining both flavors and tenderizes while also making it more resistant to spoilage. This process was particularly valued in Amish communities because brined pork could be stored for long periods in cool cellars or basements without spoiling. The natural coolness of the underground storage, paired with the strong salinity of the brine, created an environment where bacteria couldn't thrive. When a family needed pork, they could simply pull out a cut from the brine, rinse it, and cook it immediately, giving them fresh-tasting meat even in the dead of winter. For Amish homesteads that raise multiple pigs at once, this method is also practical. Instead of rushing to consume all the meat before it spoils, brining provides flexibility and security. It ensures that the harvest from butchering time can be stretched across the seasons, feeding large families until the next butchering cycle arrives. Smoking the meat the Amish way. Perhaps the most iconic Amish method of pork preservation is smoking the meat. Once cuts have been salted or brined, they are often hung in a smokehouse, a small building designed specifically for this purpose. The Amish smokehouse is usually a simple, sturdy wooden structure with a fire pit or stone hearth at the base and hooks or rods above for hanging meat. The fire isn't allowed to burn hot. Instead, it smolders slowly, producing a dense, aromatic smoke that envelops the pork for days or even weeks. Different types of wood are chosen carefully, as each imparts its own flavor. Hickory, applewood, cherry, or maple are common favorites, giving the pork a deep, savory taste that lasts long after preservation. Smoking does two things at once. First, it dries the surface of the meat, making it more resistant to bacteria and mold. Second, the compounds in wood smoke, phenols, aldehydes, and acids, act as natural preservatives. These compounds coat the meat, creating a protective layer that wards off spoilage while enhancing flavor. Large cuts like hams might hang in the smokehouse for weeks until they develop a rich color and firm texture, while smaller cuts like bacon may only need several days. Once finished, smoked pork can last for months, stored in cool, dry places, ready to be sliced and fried whenever needed. The smokehouse itself often becomes a centerpiece of Amish homesteads in winter. Its steady, smoldering fire is a familiar sight in the community, and its scent carries across the fields, reminding neighbors that food is being carefully prepared to see families through the cold season, rendering the pork fat the Amish way. While salting, brining, and smoking are the cornerstones of Amish meat preservation, another vital step is rendering pork fat into lard. For the Amish, lard isn't just a cooking ingredient, it's also a powerful preservation tool. After butchering, the fat from the pig is carefully collected and slowly melted down in large kettles over wood fires. This process separates pure, shelf-stable lard from the connective tissues and impurities. Once rendered, lard is stored in crocks, jars, or tins, often kept in cool pantries or cellars, but its real power comes in the method known as larding or potting meat. Cooked pieces of pork, such as sausage or shredded pork, are packed tightly into crocks and then completely covered with a thick layer of liquid lard. As the lard cools and solidifies, it forms an airtight seal that prevents bacteria, air, and moisture from reaching the meat. Properly sealed, pork preserved under lard can last for months without refrigeration, and when stored in a cool root cellar, even longer. Whenever a family needs meat, they simply dig out a portion from beneath the lard layer, reheat it, and then reseal the rest with freshly melted fat. The pig provides not only the meat, but also the very fat needed to preserve it, making the process entirely self-sufficient. Nothing is wasted, and everything has a purpose, an essential principle in Amish life. Drying and dehydration of pork the Amish way. Another preservation method deeply rooted in Amish tradition is drying and dehydration. While often associated with beef jerky, pork can also be dried into shelf-stable forms that last for months without refrigeration. After salting or lightly brining, thin strips of pork are hung in well-ventilated areas, sometimes near a low fire or in attics where airflow is steady but temperatures remain cool. This drying process gradually removes the moisture that bacteria need to survive. Once fully dried, the pork becomes leathery, intensely flavored, and resistant to spoilage. It can then be stored in cloth bags, wooden boxes, or sealed jars in pantries. For long journeys or times when fresh meat wasn't available, these dried strips provided Amish families with a portable, protein-rich food source. In addition to simple air drying, some Amish families use sun drying in the fall and early winter, taking advantage of crisp, cold days and steady breezes. Others combine drying with smoking, first exposing the pork to heavy smoke and then allowing it to hang until fully dehydrated. This creates a product similar to jerky, but with the added preservation benefits of smoke compounds. What makes drying especially valuable is that it requires no additional fuel or ongoing labor once the process begins. With the right environment, dry air, low humidity, and protection from pests, dried pork can remain edible for many months. In fact, in some households, dried pork is crumbled into stews or soups long after slaughter season has ended, bringing back a taste of the harvest well into spring. How Amish can the pork without modern tech? One of the most practical and widely used methods among the Amish is canning pork in jars. While some families avoid modern conveniences, many Amish groups do make use of non-electric canners, large kettles or pressure canners heated over wood or propane stoves. Canning is especially useful for preserving pork in smaller, ready-to-use portions that can last for an entire year or more. The process begins with cutting pork into manageable chunks, often browning or lightly cooking the meat first to improve flavor and texture. The pieces are then packed into sterilized glass jars, sometimes with added salt or broth, before being sealed with lids. These jars are placed into a large canner and heated for a specific length of time at the proper pressure. This eliminates bacteria and creates a vacuum seal, locking in freshness without refrigeration. Canned pork is highly versatile. Families can open a jar in the middle of winter and instantly have tender meat ready for soups, stews, or frying. It eliminates the need to thaw or prepare large cuts from storage, making mealtime more efficient. For large Amish households, this also means nothing from butchering season is wasted. Another advantage is that canning allows storage in pantries, basements, or cellars without worrying about rodents or insects. Unlike dried or smoked meat that must be carefully protected from pests, sealed jars keep pork completely safe and shelf-stable. Canning requires careful attention to detail and discipline in timing, but Amish families excel at this kind of precision. For them, the reward is not just preserved meat, but peace of mind, knowing their shelves are lined with reliable food supplies regardless of the weather or season. In an age where refrigeration dominates, Amish pork preservation stands as a living reminder. With knowledge, patience, and respect for natural methods, food can last through the harshest winters without a single switch or plug.